Fintech has a big impact on the global economy. A panel on Fintech eliminating boundaries is brought to you by Rita from Mode.
Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Really interesting summary, and I think it really leads well to our panel because you already touched upon a few areas where fintech is eliminating boundaries. So first of all, I feel so privileged to be moderating this panel of amazing panelists from various backgrounds, and to be in the same room with people who are passionate about our industry. So can I please invite my panelists onto the stage, please? So we have Miss Angela Yore, MD and founder of SkyParlour, and Ms. Rita Martins, Fintech Partnerships Lead for Finance and Risk at HSBC, and Ms. Mariana Gospodinova, General Manager Europe at Crypto.com, and Mr. Rich Wagner, CEO of CashPlus Bank. And I am Rita. I'm Rita, CCO and Director of Mode Global Holdings. I think we first of all, let's go around the table and do some self-introductions, like what you do, what your role entails, please.
Okay, hello everybody. My name's Angela Yore, as you said. I own my own public relations firm with my business partner Kimberly, who was speaking earlier as well. We're running the PR for the show. We're a fintech specialist agency and also very embedded in the space. So I'm on the advisory board of the Emerging Payments Association, Findexable, the European Women in Payments Network, and I do all of this because I want to make a difference, and I think fintech eliminates borders.
Thank you, Angela. Making a difference, yes, very inspiring. Rita, please.
So hi everyone, I'm Rita Martins. I'm the Fintech Partnerships Lead for Finance Risk and more recently also compliance at HSBC. So my role includes everything really from identifying and scouting fintechs externally to also introducing them to the right stakeholders internally and helping with any POCs or onboarding. And we cover all the different areas within these three teams. It's also a global role, so it doesn't really matter where the fintechs are based.
Thank you, Rita. Mariana, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mariana Gospodinova. Thank you for pronouncing that correctly earlier.
Very nervous doing that.
Very difficult. I'm the general manager for Europe at Crypto.com, and my role includes expanding our operations across many countries in Europe and also in the further European regions like Turkey and Russia and the CIS region. And I also look after the operations of the company globally.
Thank you, Mariana. Rich, the only gentleman on the panel.
Yeah, I feel so privileged to be up here with these lovely ladies, and I hope I can provide some historical insight to fintech. Certainly, probably one of the older fintechs out there. Although we recently got our banking license, we are a fintech at heart, a digital challenger to banks. And we started literally 16 years ago as one of the first prepaid card providers in the UK, talking a little bit about that underbanked, underserved populations. But there are so many people that are underserved, and I can share my stories. But certainly been CEO and founder for this period of time, and certainly I look forward to the conversation of where we have broken down barriers in fintech.
Thank you, Rich. And finally, about me, I think some of you probably know me from my time in Alipay. So I used to be a CEO of Alipay UK. I recently joined Mode last year as CCO and director. So Mode is a LSE main board listed business. We actually recently also secured EMI and AMLD5 registration from FCA to run crypto asset business in the UK. We're the only LSE listed business to do so. We're basically building a wallet, bringing the real benefit of open banking to merchants world, and also combining that with the reason for consumers to pay with open banking payment, which is a Bitcoin cashback. I can tell you more about Mode later on, like when we meet face to face. But let's get right into the discussion. So the topic is a very, I would say, philosophical, almost a philosophical topic, how fintech eliminates boundaries. It's also a very broad topic, so I think let's first sharpen the focus. Let's first talk about, in our panelists' view, what are the boundaries that are being eliminated by fintech? Because it's so broad, there's geographical boundary, there's how to say, like individuality and government, decentralization, centralization, just to name a few. But let's hear the view from the panelists.
Well, I'll take the view of the social view, which is I really do believe, and this is why I love this sector so much, is that we're making a meaningful difference to inclusion. And I don't just mean in the UK, where we still have 13 million people that actually don't have a bank account, but that figure's got better over the years. But I also mean in countries like, the developing world, where very simple technologies, so it's not always about, high-end biometrics, ID and all of that, but very simple peer-to-peer payments happens now across Africa, so people can make payments on their mobile phone peer-to-peer. And for that reason, I think that fintech is eliminating many barriers. And then there's, of course, all the other cross-border barriers, of which they're not all eliminated yet because we don't have full standardization. But, as it's a very difficult thing to do across hundreds of countries, but we are making great progress there in pockets across the world as well. And I think the other boundaries that we're eliminating is because fintech is so sexy at the minute, and the banking world, the financial services world was the old traditional world, we're now eliminating the boundaries of funding because there's more and more funding being flooded into the fintech space. And with funding also comes scale. With scale also comes more customers and more inclusivity.
Yeah, so it transcends borders and also the traditional way of funding business.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angela.
Well, I couldn't agree more with Angela. I particularly like the part of the financial inclusion because that's my personal view as well. If we look at fintech, there is no precise definition, right? There are many definitions of fintech, but I think we would all agree that one of the features, the key features that fintech brings is the elimination or the decrease of the cost of financial intermediation. And that's across many broad regions of finance, right? It's across allocating capital, it's across transferring capital, and it's across raising capital. And this is clearly seen by the new emerging companies that are offering at almost no cost, and sometimes no cost, transfer of payments, crowdfunding platforms. There are many out there lending to underbanked at a low cost without any papers being necessary for people to be approved. All of these, let's say, innovations are brought by fintech. And to put it broadly, right, fintech manages to influence conventional banking by offering disruption, right? And disruption is not a new thing. We have been witnessing it since ages. I mean, think about Henry Ford, for example, and the creation of the assembly line for cars. So by creating disruption, they are able to shift the way the world operates and to set new expectations among customers.
Yeah, so disintermediation, for sure. That's an exciting area. Rita, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I guess the other angle I'll probably add, and I really like the way Angela was saying it turned it sexy, financial services. I think one of the key things fintech did was really to tap into communities that didn't really care or want to engage with financial services before. One good example, I don't know if you guys know, it's Elevest. It's an app for women, and basically what it does, it gives investment, but it also creates the community of the women, and it gives investment based on at what stage the women are at. So it's nothing new, but it's really tapping and giving the financial education and literacy and making it sexy, making it mainstream, like our previous speaker was saying. to really communities or to really generations even that didn't really want to engage or think so much about their financial services and their banking and their money.
Yeah, thank you, Rita. Rich, do you have?
Yeah, nothing more substantial to add in terms of what the other panelists have said. I think the one interesting thing about fintech, it's a gateway to try things. It's a gateway to experiment, and I think for now that I've been on both sides of being in that fintech innovative space, been in the digital banking space, to see both sides of it, I think fintech has helped banks. And banks really have helped fintech, and I think there's more of that collaboration that needs to happen. People talk about, the disintermediation of the retail banking network. HSBC has been around for many years, and they're going to be around for many more years to come. And I think they can live in harmony together, and the ability to allow innovation to happen through these types of mediums gives thought and inspiration to some of the bigger banks. In some respects, I'm an HSBC customer. I think their mobile app is actually quite good. I have an ability from breaking down borders. I have 3 accounts in 3 countries, and it sits on a single platform. To be able to do that now, and I think about traveling the world and stuff like that, and working in different parts of the world, banking is now getting to a point where you don't think about it. And I think the last speaker talking about embedded financing or embedded banking, I've always talked about banking is boring. You see so many people, and I think one of the greatest banking experts in the industry, think about Uber. Uber has taken banking or payments out of the ecosystem. You don't even know you're making a payment. That's what's cool about payments. The actual transaction itself isn't cool. It's the ability, actually, because it is a boring transaction, as Andrea said, making it sexy, the ability to get into an Uber car and not even think about that complex activity of transferring a sensitive piece of information, data, monetary instrument, and they've made it seamless. And I always use that example of saying everywhere where fintech, and whether or not you're a financial enterprise or a technology enterprise, where those two things come together, I think there has been a lot of areas where we actually broke down barriers. But I look forward to some other questions where we talk about there's what's exciting about the industry, as Andrea said, is that there's many more barriers we got to break down. There's more challenges ahead of us, and that's what keeps me excited and stirred up over the last 35 years in banking and fintech, because there's so much more exciting stuff to come.
Yeah, I can clearly tell, Rich, you're very passionate about our industry, like we all are. And I think, so some really good points came out here, like breaking down borders, disintermediation. I really like, Rich, what you mentioned about experiment, right? So sometimes experiments go well, sometimes go bad, right? So I think my next question to the panelists is, do you think is this trend of elimination of boundaries a good thing for consumers, the market, and the society? I think, like recently I was thinking about this question because of, like the very, how to say, popular discussion around crypto, right? Like, which sort of stands for individual sovereignty versus government, right? But, like, I always get the question, like, this good or bad? Is this, really like something that we want? So I think this is also a good topic to talk about. Is this good or bad? Like, not just about individual sovereignty, but generally the elimination of boundaries.
I think it's a personal thing, isn't it? But I think overall for the financial services sector and for fintech, it's a good thing. I say that we've just put a wall up in America and we've just gone through Brexit here. So, it's not completely sort of playing out in, I guess, the way I would like it to. But I think that, in the future, that free movement of people and free movement of money is key. So consumers get more choice if they can buy things from different countries. And consumers get more choice if they can travel not having to worry about having their card stolen or whatever, if there's these great innovations out there to do that. But we have to say that we have to guard ourselves with regulation. That's why crypto is so interesting, because at the minute crypto's not regulated, and therefore until it's regulated, it's very difficult to sort of, eliminate borders in a way, because it's full of fraud and things like that. And then there's fraud to in general. We have to look with regulation to protect the consumer. That's the most important thing that we can do. So I say yes, let's get rid of all our borders, but first let's put in and make sure that we have a more sort of global view of how we're going to protect consumers.
Yeah, totally agree. Mariana, I saw you nodding.
Yes, I wanted to touch on the point about consumers, and I actually do believe eliminating boundaries is good for consumers, particularly doing it through fintech, because you're lowering the cost of the services that they're using. You're bringing the services closer. The proximity is very often a huge part for people who are underbanked or live in far-flung areas of certain countries. On the other hand, creating more competition between the businesses is always a good thing, because then new companies would emerge with newer services that would most likely make the prices even lower and offer products that may speak emotionally to consumers. Because if we think about the way we associate with fintech products, they also target a certain segment and they speak to us personally, and they always have like the financial well-being of a person at the center of their services, and the way they're offered are through very scalable channels that speak to you as either a young consumer or just an SME that is looking for a credit without any credit history. So overall, yes, to the point, fraud exists indeed, but if we look at the crypto industry versus traditional fintech, I'm using the word traditional for something disrupting the industry, but for me, crypto takes things a step further. I read a statistics that in the UK, 70% of all the businesses have reported some sort of security breach in 1917. So imagine that this number may actually be higher through the years. So maybe in 2021, it will be more businesses being affected by cybersecurities. And this just puts to the front the necessity to protect ourselves. And frankly speaking, prevention from fraud, from cyber fraud, is not necessarily tackled by regulation. It's more about educating yourself about security and how to protect a business. But I think fintechs are the ones that actually bring further security to the public. And I'm going to use HSBC. I'm so sorry. I'm a customer, so it just stuck in my mind. But of course, you feel that your funds are secure with HSBC, right? But I also think that if you give your money to a startup, to a fintech startup, you feel equally secure because of the top talent that they would normally hire, because of the top technology that they would always use, because of the grit that they use to provide their services and to protect their users and the data.
That's really interesting point, that, like how people get educated about security. Like, I think Rita also mentioned financial literacy, right? Fintech probably made it much more accessible to the general public, right? To understand, like without the difficult jargons, like, to understand, how security works for them. So, Rich, do you have anything, Rita?
Yeah. So I guess on that point, exactly. So I do agree with both perspectives. I think the only thing I would add, it's not just about having the right regulation and having the right controls. I think definitely, yes, it's beneficial for everyone. It's beneficial for me as a customer as well. One of the key points that you were just mentioning, Rita, is around the financial education. And we had quite a big example last year in 2020 with Robinhood, in which actually the users, they were not educated enough around the risks and actually around the actions that they were taking. So I think it's a really good, and we should definitely continue eliminating boundaries and creating new solutions, but we also need to make sure that we do educate the users on the risks that they have, that they are taking.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with the education. We have the industry, you in the audience here in the panel have created a lot of great innovation. And I'd say speed and ease was one of the greatest things that has been transformed over the last 20 years. I was talking to an old banker, a friend of mine, and we talked about the resiliency of banks. And banks are getting kind of slammed by the regulators for their ability to be up and online. And what's quite interesting about it is, it was only 20 years ago that it took 3 days to move payments, through a bank's network. And now we get upset when a payment doesn't take nanoseconds. And when it doesn't, you're already on, I've got people on the phone. I made a payment, a minute ago. It hasn't gone to my party. But that has caused a great amount of opportunistic financial crime, fraud capabilities, and the social. What's happening now is that you've got this whole group of social engineering going on because you don't go in and rob a bank these days. There's not, it's much easier to find a vulnerable individual, and I say vulnerable, but it doesn't have to be, because these social engineered type fraud activities where you ask people to move money, and we're putting things together in the UK, confirmation of payee being one of those. You're not going to stop it. Back in 2000, the whole concept of actually chip and pin being rolled out 20 years ago. I remember at a conference, we're really excited. Chip and pin is going to be raw. It's going to eliminate fraud. And I just kind of rolled my eyes and just said, it's going to help. But another industry veteran on a panel once said, fraud and financial crime is a balloon. The balloon is going to stay the same size no matter what you do with it. But you could push the balloon and you can move it, and you're going to see a little bit indentation and a reduction, but the criminal will find another area to basically opportunistically exploit the system. And we've rushed very quickly in fintech to create real-time everything. It's a real-time world. It's instantaneous gratification all the time, and that causes the ability to take advantage of the system, and we have a lot more education to help individuals understand the types of things they're in, whether it be Robinhood, whether it's moving a payment or such, or even transacting online with all the security features there, recognizing the sensitivity and the responsibility you have as a customer, not only us as a bank to protect you, but you as a customer to protect yourselves. And we've got a long way to go on that in the future.
Did someone really tell you 20 years ago that chip and pin is going to
Yes.
was going to eliminate fraud?
Well, when you're in business for 35 years, you hear some really strange predictions, and that was certainly one of them. Again, there's tons of them. I mean, retail banking is not going to go away. Retail branches are not going to go away. And look at, you look at COVID-19, and I'm CashPlus. People think, oh gosh, CashPlus, cash is going to be eliminated. Well, it's kind of funny that it was only about 3 years ago that basically they made a big deal about electronic payments being the top transactional monetary instrument in the UK. And I said, congratulations, it only took 150 years to do that. And oh, by the way, 40% of transactions today still are being done by cash. And even with COVID and all of the stories about basically not taking money out of ATMs, and certainly the transmittable elements around ATMs and COVID would scare the life out of anybody. But the fact is that, yes, we saw enough. Everybody will talk about the acceleration of the decrease in cash usage, but it's still there. I mean, COVID couldn't kill cash, and it's still going to take another 10, 20 years, and I'll probably be dead and buried, and somebody else will be up here saying it's going to die in the next 5 years. It's, some things are going to be difficult to get rid of.
Yeah, that's so elimination of boundaries or change is going to take time, right? So maybe we're actually still at dawn time of fintech. We still have a lot to do. Yeah.
Payments, it's a generational game. I mean, people talk about contactless and how contactless has transformed. And I always use this example since I'm the old timer on the panel. RFID was actually patented 30 years ago. I worked at Visa 25 years ago talking about the rollout of it, and guess what? It took 20 years, and pretty much transportation, whether it be the contactless in Hong Kong and certainly Oyster here, really transformed and created the tipping point. But guys, it did take 25 years to make it commonplace for you and I to enjoy it. So when you see the next big thing, like crypto, it is going to be huge, but don't think you're going to see it change overnight. It's going to take 20 years for the regulators to understand it, 20 years for my kids to basically understand it and be comfortable and safe with it. It's not going to change overnight, but we do need people, who innovate and forge these things forward for the rest of us, but don't accept things that will happen overnight.
Yeah. In the meantime, you see in some markets that some new technology really take off quite quickly, like QR code technology in Asian markets. I think it's probably those markets have an advantage of not having a huge, like legacy infrastructure. So it's easier to leapfrog to a new technology. That's what I think also quite interesting. Let's move to the next question. I think we already mentioned a lot about regulation. We cannot not talk about our industry without talking about regulation. So how is the role of regulators evolving, and how should fintech players look at it? I know this must be a question talked about a lot in this conference, but I think we have some like a panelist with really interesting background, so would love to hear your view on this as well.
Well, I'll start. I think with regulation, there's going to be a lot of people saying the same thing on these various different panels, but I think that we need to sort of take pity in a way on the regulators, because they don't understand the topic like we do. Yes, they live and breathe it, but in a different way in terms of governance and the legalities and policy making and audits and things like that. But they don't understand, and a case in point for this was, and I'm going to bring up the W word, which is Wirecard, is when the Wirecard disaster happened, the journalists at the FT and also the regulators were calling Wirecard in the UK an issuer processor, and they're not. So I think that what's great about the UK, I think, is that they do have a close relationship with industry. But with my dealings with the Emerging Payments Association, I've noticed that since Wirecard and since all the involvement that we had at that point, including trying to get rid of the suspension for the 18 million people that weren't able to use their accounts over that weekend, payday as well, is we have noticed that they really do now know that to eliminate boundaries, they need to be more entrenched and understand better how fintech works. So I think that's happening because, for like in 2008 when we had the financial crisis, you sometimes need a disaster to accelerate change. And I just want to argue a bit of the point that you made, Rich. I agree with you that these things take forever, because I remember July 2005 when chip and pin was first implemented and we all couldn't use it, or most of the public, we were just struggling with it at that point. And my mum still does. But I'd also say that the pace and rate of change, I think, is speeding up. I think we've got the Moore's Law industrial revolution, which is, I think, fintech. I think fintech's the point of truth between the customer and also the brand or whatever you want to buy. And money is a lot more emotional than we all think. It's where we have arguments in our families is over money. So I think that elimination of boundaries will be faster than it has been in previous years. And if you think about it, like you said, it's been since the 1950s we had the first credit card, then we had e-commerce, Amazon made the first payment online, and that was only 30 plus years ago. So think of, before that, for thousands of years, I think somebody said we were using, cash or bartering with carrots and potatoes or whatever and swapping. So, you know, I do believe that I mean, look, MasterCard brought out a stat to say in the first 8 weeks of COVID, they saw 5 years of progress in contactless and online payments. So
Yeah.
it's moving.
So I think that's a very relevant point, right? So if the speed of innovation is speeding up,
Yeah.
right? How does also, you know, how does regulation catch up, right? Like, you know, how do you make sure that probably before, you know, like before, you know, regulators have time to really like pass policy and, you know, like then things happen, right? Now things happen and first. So Mariana.
I think it all boils down to hiring the right people, right? Because if a regulator has a team of experts, such as the FCA, for example, they did have a team of cryptocurrency experts and of blockchain experts that would help them review all these companies that have submitted their MLRs and have been waiting pretty much for months to get approved. If every regulator has the same approach, it's impossible. And it's the normal modus operandi of a regulator, right? They're not supposed to be the innovators. They're not at the forefront. They are exercising oversight of what's existing already. And for them to understand new technologies, they need the right people. And I think many, many regulators are taking that approach. I personally sit in a country where crypto is regulated, and my company does have a cryptocurrency license. And the regulator took really great care of sourcing the right people who were engineers in blockchain, people who do not necessarily come from financial services background. And these are the people who wrote the law. These are the people who teach the regulator to date how to practically provide oversight and how to authorize blockchain companies. And that's key. It's always hiring the top talent that will bring you one step further.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think there is also a big mindset change, not just people change, but a mindset change. So like you're saying, when it was the financial crisis, the main role of the regulator was really to make sure that they had the right controls in place. But that has changed slightly. And now they need to create a good balance between still having the right controls in place, but also allowing innovation to happen and learning with the innovation. I also agree. And UK, I think it's a very specific country. So if you look at other countries like Europe or US, they're a bit more hands-off. While in the UK, you have examples like they have the sandbox, for example, that Fintechs can use to not just test their products with actual data. That also allows the regulators to learn with the technology in a control environment. And I think that's probably the way to go. It does depend which countries we're talking about. And there is a lot of mindset, actually. We're not just here to regulate, but we want to make sure that there is innovation. And if there is going to be innovation, why don't we allow that innovation within our controlled environment? Because innovation will always happen. So they can either just let it go or actually arrange a controlled environment like they have done in the UK.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that don't fear regulators. Talk to them, educate them. I think the UK regulatory system is one of the best in the world. I've seen how it works in the US. I mean, US doesn't even have a concept of electronic money associations. You either are not regulated or you're regulated as a bank, and it takes. And you could see some of the neo-challenger banks that have gone to from the UK to the US, and you know, none of them actually have their own bank charter. Who've moved into it, and it takes, you know, you think it's hard here at the PRA, it's nearly impossible in the US. And I think the FCA and the PRA have created those areas where fintech can actually thrive. And why the UK is certainly one of the fintech capitals of the world. And I believe that, and that's coming from an American accent. I truly, truly believe that. And it's, to some part, the regulators, but what Angela did say, you know, Wildcard is a great example of where education failed us. It shows that the lack of education really failed the industry. I don't think the regulator failed. I think they made a mistake from a standpoint that they were not educated about the decision that they had to make to protect customers' funds. And I think there's way more that we should be doing and can be doing. And I would encourage, I think the one thing that the UK also has is a great industry bodies that help do that, and they just need to do more. So Emerging Payments Association, UK Finance organization that I'm a board member on, and Innovate Finance. And between the three of those ecosystems, they've done a good job over the last 5-10 years to help, but it just proves that there's so much more these associations could do to help the regulators, and for all of us in this room to actually, talk to them, educate them. I've found early in my career here, that people feared the regulator, and if you do and you don't talk to them, they're not going to be knowledgeable about your business, about what you do. They are actually open for business, especially in the UK, and I would encourage the industry bodies, and the ecosystem that actually sits there, talk to them, educate them, because we will all be better for it.
I totally agree with the point about sophistication of UK's regulatory system. That's why also, Mode, we choose to be regulated here for both our e-money business and crypto business. Of course, the process was long, but it's worth it, right? And so let's move on to the next question. I think, there's always the word challenger used in fintech, and this is almost a question designed for Rita. What do you think is the role of big incumbents in eliminating boundaries?
So I guess the incumbents, they have probably two main roles. The first one is really to innovate themselves, and the second one is probably partnering with fintechs. It was interesting, I think, Rich, you were saying earlier that we need to have more partnerships between banks and fintechs. In 2020, the funding that went to B2B, which is business-to-business fintechs, meaning fintechs that are partnering with banks, was 5 billion euros. While B2C, which is business to customer, so fintechs are created directly for the customer, like for example, your Monzo, your Revolut, it was only 3 billion euros of funding. So there is clearly a shift around having more B2B fintechs. And the main thing I think that happened was that the reality is incumbents, they still have the biggest customer share, the customer base. So by partnering up with an incumbent, the fintech will be able to scale and will be able to, like we're talking in this panel, eliminate barriers and boundaries much faster at the scale. And I think that's also the role of the incumbents, is to partner up with some of these fintechs and make sure that we have innovation in the industry.
Thank you, Rita. And does anyone have anything to add to that?
I actually also think that they should lead by example. Right. Being the first is always a tough job. And everybody looks up to you and they expect and they follow through your path. And breaking those boundaries on your own, going forefront with regulation that does not necessarily adapt to you, is a tough job. And they have to lead by example. And I think we've seen quite a few good examples in the industry.
It's a responsibility as well.
Yeah.
And just one point, I keep talking about the Emerging Payments Association, so Tony Craddock's going to be really pleased with me. But what I've noticed is with the membership base, it was always, firstly prepay, then, a mixture of all sorts of fintechs. Now the big banks are all wanting to join and be involved in the fintech community, if you like. And so much so that our chair is now Marion King, who heads up payments for NatWest. So there's that in itself, that little tiny ecosystem of, 160 members or whatever it is now starting to change. And I think that reflects what's happening with the elimination of the borders between the them and us, the traditional, the fintechs. It's happening, like you say, it's an evolution. I wonder if that's mine.
Could be.
It is. I might have to make a sharp exit in a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. That's a very good point. So we have 1.5 minute left. Let's also talk about our own crystal ball. So what are the most, in your view, what are the most exciting areas? I hope that's not mine.
I think it's mine. Is it the red bear? That's mine. Sorry, guys.
That's the.
They won't know your
The rookie
Thank you.
mistake.
Real life.
So in your view, what are the most exciting areas that you foresee will have boundaries being eliminated in the future by fintech? And what are you most excited about, in our industry, in terms of, like eliminating boundaries and, innovation really disrupting how we live, how we work, how we consume, how we exist?
I could say, if we're going to go to line, what Angela did say, one thing I would say is technology, data is accelerating faster than we've ever seen. And to your point, I do agree that actually there is far greater opportunities to be transformative in this industry sector. And all of us sitting in this room have a responsibility to make that happen. And whether it be crypto, which I think is an area where further education, but great potential and possibility. I think the use of data to help the experience for customers and businesses, something that we do at CashPlus Bank quite a bit. And that technology element, which is, technology is a lot cheaper than it was 20 years ago. The ability to have your own, environments, use cloud-based solutions through Amazon and Azure. These things are at your disposal, and the ability to transform people's lives through financial services, through fintech, has never been greater. So I do think there is some great opportunities in the future in that front.
Thank you, Rich.
Well, certainly from my perspective, blockchain is the thing that will change fintech. And I think, Rita, you will agree with me as well, because the capabilities of a blockchain ledger, the transparency, the cost of transacting, the speed of transacting, the fact that blockchain provides a store of value. Earlier, Suzanne spoke about tokenizing livestock. I mean, you can literally tokenize and store value, hold value of anything. It could be currencies, but it could be commodity and any sort of stock. This is unprecedented. And thinking of it, I know that education is still necessary for people to trust cryptocurrencies. However, this is a great store of value, and one that can protect your currencies from inflation, which is something that people often don't understand.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'll come back to that. Thank you, Mariana. Rita.
So I guess it does depend, to Rich's point, at what timelines are we talking about. I think in the next few years it will be similar to what we have seen. So there is still a lot that can be done, and it will be done within the RegTech space. And also I think open banking, there is still a lot that we can do there. There is clearly the ESG component that it was discussed previously to this panel. If you think about in a few years' time, in 10 years' time, I think that's where we're going to see really the blockchain, the decentralized finance, and also the quantum computing, which I think that would really be a game changer for the way we operate and the way that fintechs will leverage some of the solutions.
Thank you, Rita. Angela.
Well, everybody's made, most of the really great points. The only thing that I would add to that is another very exciting thing about fintech is the amount of investment that's flooding into it, because without the investment, we can't make progress. And it's there now. I think it wasn't necessarily there a decade ago as it is today. So that was my
investment.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Angela. In my humble view, I think also, the technology that's for the up-and-coming digitally native generation. They're born with, internet. They're born with everything digital, and the technology that's gonna, change their view around money, around how our society works, is going to be the most exciting. And blockchain and crypto is definitely a very good example of that. And that's my humble view, to just add to that. And with that, we have run out of time. Thank you very much, my dear panelists, and thank you everyone for listening.